in life, you know, there's always a few ways of approaching a subject. Some people like to keep it short and simple, you know, it's very succinct. And so for those of you who are those who like things very short, essentially in ankylosing spondylitis, the inflammation of the joints in the spine results in damage or inflammation first, damage of the bones or of the affected joints. And then the body overcompensates by forming new bone, which unfortunately then results in fusion and loss of movement. And if this occurs within the spine, obviously you lose movement within your spine. So then there are people who are, who are a bit more like me and very curious, or, you know, like my mom used to say, very kepo, need to know a lot of things. So for those of you who are like me, I'll just share a bit more. So in terms of the understanding of how AS comes about, I think we need to start with not just the symptoms, but also with the fact that AS is actually a condition that has genetic predisposition, meaning if you have certain genes, you are more likely to develop AS. So over a period of, well, 5 decades or more now, we have discovered many genes that are associated with AS. But the oldest gene, HLA-B27, is actually the one that most of us will pay attention to, because AS has been associated with 50% of the risk of developing AS. So that is to say, if you have HLA-B27, and then you're exposed to environmental factors such as certain bacteria, then you are a candidate for developing AS. And so then the next important thing in the disease processes of AS is actually biomechanical stress on a structure called the enthesis. And so what is the enthesis actually? The enthesis is a structure in our body where tendon meets bone. So you can imagine how many tendons and how many bones we have in our body. And so, you know, these areas are actually prime candidates, hot property, so to speak, for the development of inflammation in AS. And so, you know, in ankylosing spondylitis, we do see involvement of such areas under high stress. One of the most common areas that a lot of patients with AS will highlight would be the posterior heel, or where the Achilles tendon attaches to the heel bone. And what happens over the enthesis is when there's stress, the cells of the enthesis will release cytokines or chemicals responsible for inflammation. And these chemicals in turn then cause transformation of some of other cells that form bone. I shall not bore you with the nitty-gritties, but that's essentially what happens. And so when it occurs within the spine, it causes spondylitis or inflammation of the spine. Again, we see what we've mentioned earlier on. So you get inflammation, erosion, and then the body tries to repair itself by causing too much bone formation. So clearly a case of too much of a good thing being a bad thing. Likewise, for entheses away from the spine, so in other joints like the heel, even the elbow sometimes, you may actually develop similar injuries from mechanical stress and form new bones as well. So the process of bone formation in itself is quite complex. However, what we do know is when it's unregulated, you do develop ankylosis or fusion, which is what happens here.